Good evening, folks. Here's a rather particular story about Rian Johnson and his new movie, Knives Out, and how he was inspired by his love of Poirot. Now, if you don't know Rian Johnson, he's the writer and director of Episode 8, Star Wars, and originally of Brick. Now, Brick was a noir mystery set in a high school, I believe it's 70s setting? Can't recall exactly. And it had a rather sophisticated script. You have to know how to write for murder mysteries in order to write and produce a certain movie. So to say that he's inspired by Poirot is like, okay, cool. He has some intelligence behind him. He knows what he's doing. And that is where I learned about Rian Johnson. I rather liked Brick. It wasn't perfect. It had some rather strange dialogue as far as noir stories go. A bit over the top, a bit hard to understand. But that's the beauty of noir. You're allowed to do some rather crazy scenarios, some rather over-the-top, dramatic, and violent, and sexy, dark stories. That's the beauty of it. And I think with his style of filmmaking, that works out. That works well. The kind of stories he wants to tell. With trying to put a particular Star Wars franchise or Star Wars rendition, probably not the best fit. So stuff like murder mysteries, noirs, subgenres, that can work. Space operas, as we've seen, for whatever reason, not so much. So he's taking his love of Poirot and turned Daniel Craig into a detective, which is, I think, rather interesting. I'm not saying it's, oh my God, I got to go see this movie interesting. I think it's rather curious, and I'm curious what someone who is inspired by Poirot, who happens to be one of my favorite detective story franchises, at least in the whodunit style, or the British style of whodunit, or murder mystery, to be worth checking out. So, before he was doing all this stuff, he did Brick, Looper, and Episode 8. Right, okay. Leading the charge in cracking the case of Christopher Plummer's bumped-off patriarch, okay, will be Daniel Craig's detective, the brilliantly named Benoit Blanc. Now, Benoit Blanc is an actual name of an actor in France, I believe. I don't know what's so brilliantly named about Mr. Blanc here. Maybe I'm pronouncing his first name wrong. Johnson's homage to Agatha Christie's most iconic creation, Hercule Poirot. I don't know what makes a French-named detective a homage to Hercule Poirot. Hercule Poirot, yes, is French, but he's Belgium. He's the French side of Belgium, which is 3 other major cultures or peoples. So I don't see, I mean, we're getting another British man to play a Frenchman. These things don't end well, or don't make sense, let's just say. Coming into it, being such a big fan of Poirot, it was hard to know even where to begin in terms of creating a new detective that's going to hold a candle to that. Yeah, it's kind of hard to do something against the best. And if you're going to strive for something, you should strive for the best. So a Sherlock, a Nero Wolfe, Poirot, Miss Marple, these kinds of legendary style characters. But the thing is, you have to get what makes these detectives great. The definitive armchair detective is Nero Wolfe. There's an episode where Hercule he acts completely as an armchair detective. Poirot is kind of like do almost everything, but mostly use his brain, whereas Sherlock is sort of the well-rounded detective, obviously very brilliant in deduction, but he can go out on stakeouts, he can disguise himself, he can do all sorts of things. Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, she was an old woman, so she had a lot of old-school sensibilities from small towns and villages in England, and she was also a ventriloquist. She could play little tricks on people. So lots of interesting characters to choose from, and honestly, I didn't see enough from the trailer to pick up on anything that Daniel Craig was able to mimic any of the sensibilities of Hercule Poirot. So it's a little difficult to grasp what he means here. Benoit Blanc has some of the elements of Poirot. Okay, which? I don't know. That he's a bit self-inflated. Yeah, most of these detectives are, except for Miss Marple. But there's a warmth to him which shines through with Daniel. The thing with Poirot is he's a rather complicated creature. There is a sense of safety you get in knowing that when he's around, he's going to solve the case. He's going to catch the bad guy, or he's at least going to fix or right a wrong. So there's always that sense of safety. I don't think there's a sense of warmth, though, with Poirot. So I'm not exactly sure where he's getting that. Maybe in the BBC movie versions of the stories, which they did around 2003, 2004-ish, I believe, where they stopped going from the seasonal episodes and did like a movie a year, where they put a lot more money into it. Not to say it's good or bad, but David Suchet, which played as the quintessential Poirot for almost 25 years, you really see him as Poirot in the first few seasons, and then the ending, where they did a show a season or a show a year, where it was pretty much textbook. It wasn't too much. They were playing around with his Christianity if he actually had that. They were playing around with movie magic and drama as opposed to the actual mystery and the idiosyncrasies that made Poirot himself. The influence of Poirot doesn't just come through Craig's character, but through the film as a whole. I was thinking about Agatha Christie movies that had Peter Ustinov as Poirot when I was writing this. He says, they were my tonal touchstones with that sense of an all-star cast, a bunch of actors you love to see having a blast. Now, in pretty much all, even the BBC David Suchet movies, all of the Poirot movies that were post-60s or from the 70s up had an all-star cast. You can look to the, Peter Finney? I'm trying to remember all the names here. I don't remember seeing them all. Albert Finney. That's probably the most famous. Murder on the Orient Express, all-star cast. There was the most recent Kenneth Branagh, Murder on the Orient Express. Again, another all-star cast. So that's not a big deal. The thing with, I'm a little concerned though, is with Peter Ustinov and Albert Finney and a few others, like these are really old films. Not Andrew Sachs. Where is it? Trying to see him. Tony Randall, that's one. Like they're played for joke. They're not played for jokes, but they're played up for jokes. And it's not just the people who play Poirot. When if you see Peter Ustinov, it's almost comical the way he reacts to things, where, yeah, he's playing Poirot and he has some serious moments, but half the show is pretty funny. It's pretty ridiculous. His mannerisms, not so much, but the way he sounds. It sounds like he's kidding around. He's trying to joking around. And to see that as an inspiration is very odd, which implies a rather comical detective, a rather goofy detective. Not Columbo goofy, but just joking around, sort of comedy under the door. Sort of, oh, what was that? What did you say? And to say Peter Ustinov is very specific, as opposed to the definitive Poirot, or the longest standing Poirot, who is David Suchet, which I don't have a picture for, unfortunately, because this video they posted was probably removed. So there's the man. I mean, this guy had all the markings of a Poirot, the egg-shaped head. They worked with the mustache several years to get it right. The walk, the padding, everything was just right. He had a brilliant tone of voice between was it French and Belgian? I can't remember the exact way he placed it. But he's a method actor. He took the books apart. He read every single book he could and had this huge booklet himself he wrote on what would Poirot do? How would Poirot react? So Ustinov, I'm not saying he was a bad Poirot. It's just a very specific tone. And if you are a Poirot fan and you don't know David Suchet, it's like saying, well, I love Batman, but I never saw the Nolan trilogy, or never commenting on it. That's what this sort of sounds like to me. Like, how could you not mention David Suchet? Because whatever he saw in Peter Ustinov is a fraction of what is present in David Suchet. David Suchet had comedy, he had drama, he had class, he had every description that you could imagine that was in Agatha Christie's Poirot's. So this is like a very eccentric flavor of, I don't know exactly what kind of murder mystery this is going to be, because when you're talking about Agatha Christie, she did so many kinds. The locked door mysteries, usually mysteries that involve the rich. So there's a big mansion, which is here. So I can say, okay, it's a cloistered sort of rich family, very eccentric. That's pretty common, but that's pretty common in most murder mysteries too. So it's kind of odd. I mean, I'm not going to go see it. I have no interest in seeing interpretations of someone talking about Poirot, not actually watching Poirot, the most definitive Poirot. And I think Ustinov only did 4 or 5 movies from 1970s to 80s. And like, if you want to watch some clips on YouTube, go ahead to see what I mean. But it's an odd interpretation. Imagine a comic book someone doing a what if or an Elseworlds in Marvel or DC, and a writer or artist doing a version of Batman or the X-Men, and then being inspired by that. That's what Peter Ustinov is when you're talking about Poirot. Nowadays, if you're not talking about the Murder on the Orient Express, the original, the Albert Finney version, or David Suchet, you're talking about a very obscure interpretation. You're talking about a very obscure old play, stage play. It's very strange to see anyone not talking about David Suchet, because that is the definitive version. So, hey, you know what, guys? Who knows? Maybe Rian Johnson is going back to his roots. He's going back to what makes movies great for him. I thought Brick was actually well done. It's not a fantastic murder mystery, but it's such a nice spin on the noir genre, and combining it with the whatever time period it was. I could have sworn it was the 70s, and on a shoestring budget, and done in high school. It's such an interesting story for those qualities alone. Plus, you could do all the twists and turns you want in a murder mystery. That's the point. You're supposed to tell a confusing tale to get people interested and make them think. So, great for trying to do something new with murder mysteries. Not so great in trying to take a popular franchise that's the biggest franchise of movie history and, not getting it right, to put it lightly. Anywho, just thought you guys would like to know that. Thanks for listening, and have yourself a great evening.